Her brother walked out of the will reading A Millionaire. She walked out with a collapsing farm and a secret no one in that room was ready for. The morning of Eleanor Whitaker's funeral, the sky over Millbrook hung low and gray as if the whole town knew something was about to break. Clara Bennett sat in the front pew, hands folded tightly in her lap. At 62 she kept her face calm, but inside grief pressed hard against her ribs. Eleanor had not just been her grandmother, she had been her shelter. Her safe place. The one person who always believed Clara was stronger than she looked. Across the aisle stood her younger brother Nathan Bennett, polished in a black suit, accepting condolences like a man already stepping into power. Later, the family gathered in Eleanor's old downtown house for the will reading. The room went silent when attorney Howard Reed opened the thick folder. Nathan inherited 3 luxury properties. Investment accounts, company shares, bank deposits worth millions. Whispers filled the room. Nathan lowered his eyes, pretending to be humble, but the corner of his mouth betrayed him. Then Howard looked at Clara. To Clara Bennett he read, Eleanor Whitaker leaves full ownership of the Whitaker farm several hours outside the city. Nothing else. The room froze. Someone coughed. Someone else looked away. Clara blinked, trying to understand. That farm had been abandoned for years, broken windows, dead fields. A house sinking into weeds. Nathan stepped beside her and said softly, "Maybe you can sell it." Clara looked at him. There was no comfort in his voice. Only pity. That night alone in her living room, Clara stared at her grandmother's photograph. Eleanor had never been careless. Never unfair. So why had she left Clara a ruin, and Nathan the fortune? The next morning, the silence around Clara Bennett became louder than any insult. Her phone did not stop buzzing. Not with comfort. Not with love. With opinions. You should sell it. Don't let that place drain you. Your grandmother must have had her reasons. And then the one that cut deepest. Maybe Eleanor knew Nathan could handle real money better. Clara sat at her kitchen table, still wearing the same gray sweater from the night before. A cup of coffee had gone cold beside her. Across from her, Eleanor Whitaker's photograph leaned against a small vase of white flowers. Clara stared at that face. The soft eyes. The careful smile. The woman who had taught her how to sew a button, balance a checkbook, and keep walking when life embarrassed you in public. She wouldn't do this to hurt me, Clara whispered. But the rest of the family had already decided what the will meant. Nathan was the winner. Clara was the afterthought. By noon, she arrived at her cousin Patricia's house, where several relatives had gathered after the funeral. The moment Clara stepped inside, the conversation changed shape. Not stopped. Just changed. That was worse. People smiled too quickly. Voices dropped too low. Eyes moved from Clara's face to her shoes, then away again. Nathan stood near the fireplace, one hand in his pocket, speaking to 2 uncles about investment managers and property taxes. He looked comfortable, almost glowing. He had always known how to fill a room. Clara had always known how to disappear inside one. Patricia crossed the room with a thin smile. "Clara, honey," she said, touching her arm lightly, "how are you holding up?" Clara nodded. "I'm all right." Patricia leaned closer. "I know yesterday was hard. That farm, well, it was unexpected." Across the room someone gave a soft laugh. Not loud. Just enough. Clara heard it anyway. Nathan turned and walked toward her with a glass of sparkling water in his hand. "Clara," he said, "I was just telling Uncle Paul that I can ask one of my real estate contacts to look at that property for you." "For me?" Clara asked. "Of course." Nathan smiled. No sense letting emotion get in the way. Old farms are expensive. Repairs, taxes, insurance. You don't want to get buried under something like that. Something like that. As if her inheritance were trash left on a curb. Clara looked around the room. No one defended her. No one said maybe Eleanor had trusted her with something important. No one even wondered out loud if there was more to the story. They only saw Nathan's millions. And Clara's ruin. Aunt Linda, sitting by the window with a cup of tea, sighed loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Well," she said, "Eleanor was a smart woman. Maybe she knew Nathan had the experience to manage the bigger things." The room went quiet. Clara's fingers tightened around the strap of her purse. Patricia murmured Linda. But she did not correct her. No one did. Nathan looked down, pretending to be uncomfortable, but he did not step in either. Clara felt heat climb into her face. She was 62 years old, yet, in that moment, she felt like a child being discussed by adults who had already decided she was not enough. Not smart enough. Not strong enough. Not worthy enough. She took one slow breath. Then another? "I don't think Grandma made that decision because she doubted me," Clara said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. Nathan tilted his head. "Nobody said that." Clara looked at Aunt Linda. Then at Patricia. Then back at Nathan. "You didn't have to." A small silence fell over the room. For the first time that day, Nathan's smile slipped. Clara turned to leave, but Patricia followed her to the hallway. "Don't take it personally," Patricia whispered. "People are just surprised." Clara opened the front door. Cold air brushed her face. "That's the problem," she said. "Everyone is surprised I got anything at all." She walked down the porch steps alone. Behind her, the family voices slowly returned, soft and comfortable, as if she had never been there. But something inside Clara had changed. Not fully. Not loudly. Just a small crack in the grief. A thin line of anger. All her life people had mistaken her quietness for weakness. They had smiled over her head, explained things she already understood, and praised Nathan for confidence while calling Clara sensitive. But Eleanor had never done that. Eleanor had seen her. Really seen her. That evening, Clara sat in her car outside her apartment for a long time before going in. Streetlights glowed against the windshield. Her hands rested on the steering wheel. She could still hear them. Maybe Eleanor knew Nathan could handle real money better. Maybe. Or maybe Eleanor had known that money could blind a man. Maybe she had left Nathan the shiny things because that was all he knew how to value. And maybe she had left Clara the broken farm because something buried inside it still mattered. Clara reached into her purse and pulled out the folder attorney Howard Reed had given her. The deed. The old survey. The address. A farm several hours away, forgotten by everyone except the woman who had refused to sell it. Clara looked again at the name printed on the first page. Whitaker Farm. Her grandmother's last gift. Her family called it a burden. Nathan called it something to sell. But Clara, for the first time since the will reading, did not feel ashamed. She felt called. The next morning, before the sun came up, Clara packed a small bag, placed Eleanor's photograph on the passenger seat, and started the car. No one came with her. No one believed in her. No one thought she would find anything. And that was exactly why she had to go. The road to Whitaker Farm seemed longer than Clara remembered. By the time the city disappeared behind her, the morning had turned pale and quiet. Tall buildings gave way to gas stations, empty fields, rusted mailboxes, and small towns where people still waved from pickup trucks like time had not moved much at all. Clara drove with both hands on the wheel. Eleanor's photograph sat on the passenger seat, tucked gently against her purse. Every few miles, Clara glanced at it. "You knew what you were doing," she whispered. But the question stayed with her. Why? Why would Eleanor leave Nathan the money, the buildings, the accounts, the things everyone could understand? And why would she leave Clara a farm no one wanted? The family's voices kept coming back. Maybe Eleanor knew Nathan could handle real money better. Maybe she didn't trust Clara with that kind of fortune. Maybe the farm was all that was left. Clara tightened her jaw. "No," she said to the empty car. The word surprised her. It came out stronger than she expected. Because deep down beneath the hurt and embarrassment, Clara knew one thing with absolute certainty. Eleanor Whitaker was not careless. She had never been. When Clara was a girl, Eleanor kept every receipt in labeled envelopes. She remembered birthdays without writing them down. She chose her words slowly, especially when those words could wound or heal. She had once told Clara, "A foolish person gives people what shines. A wise person gives them what lasts." Clara had not understood it then. Now those words followed her down the highway like a warning. 3 hours later, the road narrowed into a strip of cracked asphalt. Trees leaned over both sides, their branches bare and tangled. The GPS signal flickered, then vanished. Clara slowed the car. Ahead, half hidden behind weeds, stood an old wooden sign. Whitaker Farm. The paint was faded, almost white. One side hung lower than the other, swinging gently in the wind. Clara pulled over. For a moment, she just sat there. No music. No traffic. Only the low hum of the engine and her own breathing. Then she turned the car down the dirt road. The tires rolled over stones and dry leaves. Dust rose behind her. The farther she drove, the more the property seemed to swallow her whole. Finally, the main gate appeared. Tall. Iron. Rust climbing over it like a disease. Clara stepped out of the car and stood before it. The air smelled of dry grass, old wood, and rain that had not yet fallen. Somewhere far off, a crow called once, then went silent. The gate groaned when she pushed it open. The sound cut through the stillness. She walked in slowly. The farmhouse stood at the top of a slight rise, larger than she remembered from childhood. Its white paint had peeled away in long strips. Several windows were broken. Vines crawled up the porch posts. The front steps sagged in the middle as if tired of holding up the past. Clara stopped at the bottom step. "This is what you left me," she whispered. For the first time since the will reading, doubt slipped in. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe this was not a secret. Maybe it was only a ruin. Inside, the house smelled of dust and damp wood. Sheets covered old furniture. Sunlight slipped through cracked blinds and thin golden lines. Every footstep stirred the silence. Clara moved from room to room. A dining room with a long table. A kitchen with chipped blue tiles. A hallway lined with faded photographs. She paused before one picture. Eleanor, much younger, standing in a field beside several workers. Her sleeves were rolled up. Her face was serious but proud. Behind her, rows of green crops stretched into the distance. Clara leaned closer. This was not the abandoned place the family mocked. This had been alive once. Full of people. Full of purpose. She touched the dusty frame. "What happened here?" she asked. No answer came. Only the wind pressing softly against the broken glass. In the study, Clara found an old desk pushed against the wall. Its surface was covered with yellowed papers and a rusted lamp. She opened one drawer, then another. Receipts. Maps. Old letters. Most of them meant nothing at first. Then she found a small envelope tucked beneath a stack of property tax notices. Her name was written on the front. Clara Bennett. Not typed. Written by Eleanor's hand. Clara's breath caught. She sat down slowly in the chair. For several seconds she could not open it. Her fingers trembled. This was no accident. Eleanor had known Clara would come. Not Nathan. Not the cousins. Not the relatives who laughed softly in living rooms and judged from a distance. Clara. She slid one finger beneath the flap and pulled out a single page. The paper was old, but the ink was clear. "My dearest Clara. If you are reading this, then you came to see the farm for yourself. That means I was right about you." Clara covered her mouth. Her eyes burned. She kept reading. "Do not believe what they say about this place. Do not believe it is worthless simply because it looks broken. Some things must be hidden until the right person is ready to protect them." Clara looked around the room. The dust. The cracked walls. The forgotten photographs. Suddenly the house no longer felt empty. It felt like it had been waiting. The letter continued. "Your brother understands wealth. You understand meaning. That is why I chose you." A tear slipped down Clara's cheek. She did not wipe it away. All the humiliation from the past 2 days rose inside her again. The pitying smiles. Nathan's soft little suggestion to sell. Aunt Linda's sharp sentence by the window. Maybe Eleanor knew Nathan could handle real money better. Clara almost laughed through the tears. No. Eleanor had known exactly what Nathan could handle. And exactly what he could not. Clara folded the letter carefully and held it against her chest. Outside, the wind moved through the dry grass. For the first time she heard it differently. Not as emptiness. As a call. She stood, walked back to the hallway and looked again at the photograph of Eleanor in the fields. Her grandmother's eyes seemed to meet hers across the years. Clara had arrived ashamed. She had arrived wounded. She had arrived wondering if she had been given the family's leftovers. But now, standing in that broken farmhouse with Eleanor's letter in her hands, she understood one thing clearly. This was not punishment. This was trust. And somewhere on that farm, buried beneath dust, debt, and silence, Eleanor Whittaker had left her the truth. A cold draft moved through the study. Clara Bennett stood completely still, her grandmother's letter pressed against her chest. For 2 days, the world had told her the same thing. Sell the farm. Forget the farm. Walk away from the farm. But now the old house seemed to breathe around her, as if every cracked wall, every dust-covered picture, every loose floorboard had been holding its tongue for years. Clara folded Eleanor Whittaker's letter and placed it carefully inside her purse. Then she looked around the study again. Not like a visitor this time. Like an heir. The desk drawers were swollen from age. The handles were cold beneath her fingers. She pulled them open one by one, finding old receipts, brittle envelopes, yellowed ledgers, and property tax notices that made her stomach tighten. At first it all looked like failure. Late payments. Repair estimates. Unpaid maintenance bills. Warnings from the county. Her family's voices returned again. That place will bury you. Maybe Nathan should help you sell it. Clara almost closed the drawer. Then something caught her eye. A folded map. It was tucked behind the back panel of the bottom drawer, nearly hidden in shadow. Clara pulled it free slowly, careful not to tear the paper. Dust rose into the light. The map showed the entire Whittaker farm. But not the way it appeared in the legal documents. This map had marks everywhere. Small circles. Handwritten notes. Lines connecting the farmhouse to barns, storage buildings, old wells, and structures Clara had not even seen yet. In the corner, written in Eleanor's neat hand, were 3 words. Do not discard. Clara's breathing changed. She carried the map outside. The afternoon sun was low now, turning the farm gold and gray at the same time. The wind moved through the tall dry grass. The land stretched farther than she had imagined, rolling past the farmhouse, past 2 ruined barns, toward a line of trees in the distance. Clara walked slowly down the porch steps. The first barn stood crooked, its red paint almost gone. One door hung open, swinging slightly with a tired groan. Inside the air smelled of hay, old oil and rust. At first there was nothing. Broken tools. An overturned wheelbarrow. Stacks of rotting boards. Then Clara saw the wall. Behind a pile of cracked wooden crates, someone had nailed up an old black and white photograph. It showed dozens of people standing in front of that very barn. Men in work shirts. Women in long skirts. Children sitting on fence rails. And in the center stood Eleanor. Young. Proud. Alive with purpose. Clara stepped closer. Below the photograph was a faded sign. Whitaker Community Storage Co-op. Clara whispered the words. Community storage. She looked back at the map. The barn was marked with a circle. Beside it, Eleanor had written first stage. Clara's pulse quickened. This had not been just a farm. It had been something organized. Something built. Something meant to serve more than one family. She moved to the second building, a long warehouse with broken windows and vines climbing across the roof. The door resisted her at first. She pushed harder. Wood scraped against dirt and the smell of dust and damp paper rushed out. Inside were shelves. Rows and rows of them. Some empty. Some still holding sealed boxes. Clara opened the nearest one. Inside were notebooks. Dozens of them. Names. Dates. Crop records. Delivery logs. Payments made to local workers. Small farmers. Families. People Clara had never heard of, all tied to this forgotten place. Her throat tightened. This farm had once been a lifeline. Not a burden. Not a joke. Not the ugly leftover Nathan pitied. A lifeline. She opened another box and found newspaper clippings. Most were faded, but one headline was still clear. Local farm project brings new hope to struggling county. Clara sat down on an old wooden crate. For a moment she could not move. The silence around her was no longer empty. It was crowded with voices from the past. Workers laughing beside machinery, children running through fields, trucks rolling in before sunrise. Eleanor giving orders with her sleeves rolled up and dirt on her shoes. The farm had been alive. And then something had stopped it. Clara continued deeper into the warehouse, following the map by the weak light coming through the broken windows. Near the back she found a metal cabinet pushed against the wall. It was locked. She searched the drawers around it, then remembered the small key ring Attorney Howard Reed had given her with the deed. Her hands shook as she tried each key. The fourth one turned. The cabinet opened with a sharp metallic crack. Inside was another folder. Thick. Tied with a piece of string. On the front Eleanor had written, "For Clara only." Clara's heart slammed once. She untied the string. The first page was not a bill. Not a map. Not a receipt. It was a project outline. Names of buildings. Land sections. Community partners. Long-term plans. And at the top, printed in bold letters, was a title Clara had never seen before. Whitaker Regional Development Plan. Clara stared at it. The farm around her seemed to tilt. A ruined house. Broken barns. Dead fields. That was what everyone else saw. But Eleanor had hidden a whole history here. A history big enough to be erased. Big enough to be protected. Clara turned the page and a loose photograph slipped out, landing face up on the dusty floor. She bent down and picked it up. Eleanor stood beside three men Clara did not recognize. Behind them was the farmhouse, freshly painted and bright in the sun. But one face in the photograph had been circled in red. Under it, Eleanor had written two words. He lied. Clara's skin went cold. The wind struck the warehouse wall, making the whole building creak. Clara looked out through the broken window toward the empty fields. Suddenly the farm did not feel abandoned. It felt watched. She gathered the folder, the map, and the photograph into her arms. The sun was almost gone now. Long shadows stretched across the land. Clara had come looking for a reason. Now she had more than that. She had proof that Whitaker Farm had once carried a dream bigger than money. And somewhere inside its ruins Eleanor had left the first pieces of a secret someone had wanted buried forever. Clara Bennett did not sleep that night. She sat at the small motel desk with the yellow lamp buzzing above her, the folder spread open in front of her like a wound. Whitaker Regional Development Plan. The words looked official. Important. Too important for a place everyone called worthless. Outside the town was quiet. A passing truck rolled by once every few minutes, its headlights sweeping across the curtains. Clara barely noticed. Her eyes kept moving from page to page, trying to understand what Eleanor Whitaker had built before time's silence and someone's lies buried it. There were maps of the entire property. Not just fields and barns. Training buildings. Storage facilities. A small processing center. A community market. Housing plans for seasonal workers. Irrigation lines. Road access. Even a proposed clinic. Clara leaned back slowly. This had not been a farm. This had been a future. a future with Eleanor's name on every page. In the folder, Clara found a typed proposal dated more than 30 years earlier. The title had been changed by hand. The original name, Whitaker Regional Development Plan, was crossed out. Above it, in Eleanor's handwriting, was another name. Project Horizon. Clara whispered it into the quiet room. Project Horizon. The name felt too big for the cracked barns and broken windows she had walked through that afternoon. But the more she read, the more the ruins changed in her mind. She saw the storage co-op filled with local farmers bringing in produce before dawn. She saw workers unloading crates. She saw young people learning trades instead of leaving town forever. She saw mothers buying fresh food at a market that did not require them to drive 40 miles. She saw Eleanor standing in the middle of it all, sleeves rolled up, hair pinned back, giving orders with that steady voice Clara remembered from childhood. Not rich. Not flashy. But powerful. The next page listed names. Families. Small landowners. County officials. Church groups. A community college. A bank. And at the bottom, written in blue ink, Eleanor had circled one sentence. This project belongs to the people, not to investors. Clara touched the words with her fingertips. That sounded exactly like her grandmother. The woman who brought soup to sick neighbors but never let anyone call her soft. The woman who could smile at a banker and still make him lower his voice. The woman who once told Clara money is useful but ownership is protection. Clara turned another page. This one showed projected profits. Not millions overnight. Steady growth. Jobs. Food supply contracts. Land restoration. A regional model that could have changed the county. Clara's breath caught. If Project Horizon had succeeded, Whitaker Farm would have become the center of something huge. Not just financially. Socially. Historically. Then came the photographs. Eleanor standing beside a newly built warehouse. Eleanor shaking hands with a group of farmers. Eleanor at a long table covered with blueprints. The same three men appeared in several pictures. One of them had been circled in red. The same man from the photograph Clara found in the warehouse. He lied. Clara stared at his face. A polished smile. Dark suit. Hand resting too comfortably on Eleanor's shoulder. She did not know his name yet, but she knew the feeling he gave her. Cold. The kind of man who smiled while measuring what he could take. At sunrise, Clara returned to the farm. The fields were washed in pale gold light. Mist clung low to the grass. The old farmhouse looked less frightening now, though no less broken. Clara parked near the porch and stepped out with the folder tucked under one arm. This time she did not hesitate at the gate. She walked straight to the warehouse. Inside, dust floated in the morning beams. Clara moved past the shelves, past the boxes of ledgers, past the broken crates. In the back corner, she found more cabinets. One held contracts. Another held correspondence. Another was packed with old community surveys. People had believed in this. They had signed their names. They had offered land, labor, equipment, hope. Clara opened a brown envelope and found a newspaper clipping. The headline was faded but still readable. Project Horizon promises new life for rural county. Below it was a photograph of Eleanor at a podium speaking to a crowd gathered outside the farmhouse. Clara could almost hear her. "We are not waiting to be saved," Eleanor had said in the article. "We are building something of our own." Clara lowered the paper. Her throat tightened. For years her family had reduced Eleanor to bank accounts and property values. They spoke of her fortune like that was the proof of her life. But this was the proof. This was what Eleanor had protected. Not money in Nathan's hands. Not luxury buildings with clean windows. This broken farm. This buried dream. This promise. Clara walked outside and stood between the warehouse and the fields. The wind moved across the empty land, bending the tall grass in waves. For a moment, the past and present seemed to overlap. Broken barns became busy again. The silent road filled with trucks. The empty fields turned green. And Eleanor Whitaker stood in the distance, not as an old woman in a photograph but as the leader Clara had never fully known. Clara opened the folder again. At the bottom of the final page, Eleanor had written one line. "Clara, if Project Horizon is still possible, you will know what to do." Clara's hands trembled. Not from fear this time. From the weight of being chosen. Behind her, the farmhouse creaked in the wind. Ahead of her, the land stretched wide and waiting. Her brother had inherited the fortune everyone could count. But Clara had inherited the reason that fortune had ever mattered. And for the first time, standing in the ruins of Whitaker Farm, she understood the secret her grandmother had left behind. Project Horizon had never died. It had only been waiting for someone brave enough to bring it back. The folder was heavier than paper should be. Clara Bennett carried it back into the farmhouse with both arms wrapped around it as if the wind might snatch the truth away before she could understand it. Project Horizon had not failed. Not naturally. Not because Eleanor Whittaker dreamed too big. Someone had broken it. Clara knew it the moment she opened the next section of documents. The first page was a legal notice. Then another. Then another. Lawsuits. Delays. Permit disputes. Frozen bank accounts. Missing signatures. County objections that appeared suddenly after years of approval. Clara spread the papers across the dining room table, pushing aside dust with the sleeve of her sweater. The old chandelier above her trembled slightly in the wind. Outside, the empty fields waited under a hard white sky. She read every line. Slowly. Carefully. The way Eleanor would have. At first, Project Horizon had moved fast. Land had been secured. Workers had been hired. Farmers had signed agreements. A regional college had agreed to send instructors. A small medical group had shown interest in opening a rural clinic on the property. Then everything changed. One investor pulled out. Then another. The bank demanded new collateral. A key contract disappeared. A county inspector accused the project of violating rules that had never been mentioned before. Clara turned the page. There was Eleanor's handwriting in the margin. This was coordinated. Clara's fingers froze. The next page was a letter. Short. Cold. Anonymous. Mrs. Whittaker, stop pushing this project. You are standing in front of people more powerful than you understand. Clara looked toward the hallway. The house was silent, but it no longer felt peaceful. It felt like a place that had survived an attack. She kept reading. There were meeting notes from Eleanor herself. Names were written in tight, careful script. Some were circled. Others were crossed out. One line appeared 3 times in different places. Do not trust the outside investors. Clara sat down slowly. The 3 men from the photograph. The polished smiles. The suits. The hand on Eleanor's shoulder. They had not been partners. They had been the knife. Clara picked up the photograph again. The man circled in red stared back at her with that same easy smile. He lied. Under the photograph, tucked beneath another sheet, was a copy of a private agreement. It proposed moving control of Project Horizon away from Eleanor and into a new development company. The language was clean, professional, almost harmless. But Clara understood what it meant. They had tried to take the project from her. Not help her. Take it. The agreement would have turned the farm into private real estate. The community market would be gone. The training center would be gone. The worker housing would be gone. Everything Eleanor had promised to the people would become profit for strangers. Clara felt anger rise in her chest. Not loud. Not messy. A deep, steady anger. The kind that makes a person sit up straighter. She turned another page and found a handwritten note from Eleanor. They thought I would sign because I was tired. They thought grief, age, and pressure would make me weak. They were wrong. Clara swallowed hard. She could see her grandmother clearly now. Not the gentle woman in the church pew. Not the quiet old woman with soft hands and a warm kitchen. But Eleanor Whittaker standing in this very room facing men who wanted to strip her dream down to numbers. And she had refused. That refusal had cost her everything. The next documents told the rest. The bank withdrew support. Vendors sued for unpaid balances. Permits expired. Farmers who had trusted Eleanor were pressured to leave. One by one, the workers disappeared. The warehouses emptied. The fields dried out. The farmhouse went quiet. Project Horizon did not collapse in one day. It was strangled. Piece by piece. Clara walked outside with the papers still in her hand. The sky had darkened. Wind rushed across the land, bending the weeds flat. A loose piece of metal on the barn roof clanged again and again like a warning bell. She crossed to the old warehouse and stood before the faded co-op sign. Whittaker Community Storage Co-op. Her eyes filled. All those people. All that hope. Buried under paperwork, threats, and greed. Grandma Clara whispered, "Why didn't you tell anyone?" But she already knew. Because no one had listened when Eleanor was alive. And after she died, they had listened even less. They saw Nathan's fortune and called it success. They saw Clara's farm and called it failure. They had no idea the real fortune had been hidden here all along. Back inside the farmhouse, Clara found one final envelope in the folder. It was sealed with tape so old it cracked when she opened it. Inside was a single sheet. Clara, if you find this, understand one thing. I did not lose Project Horizon because it was impossible. I lost it because the wrong people wanted it for themselves. I protected what I could. I kept the land, I kept the records. I kept the truth. Clara's breath shook. The letter continued. One day someone will come for this place again. When they do, do not believe their smiles. A sound came from outside. A car. Clara turned toward the window. A black SUV rolled slowly through the front gate. It stopped near the porch. For a moment no one moved. Then a man stepped out in a dark coat, smooth and confident as if he had been here before. Clara stood behind the curtain, Eleanor's warning still in her hand. Do not believe their smiles. The man looked up at the farmhouse. Then he smiled. The man at the gate did not knock right away. He stood beside the black SUV, one hand resting on the open door, staring at Whitaker Farm like he was looking at something he had already bought in his mind. Clara Bennett watched from behind the curtain. The warning in Eleanor's letters still shook in her hand. One day someone will come for this place again. When they do not believe their smiles. The man adjusted his coat, climbed back into the SUV and drove away without stepping onto the porch. That frightened Clara more than a confrontation would have. He had not come to ask. He had come to confirm. Hours later, while Clara was still gathering the papers from the dining room table, another world was unfolding several hours away. Nathan Bennett sat on the balcony of his new penthouse looking down at the city lights. A week earlier he had been the successful younger brother. Now he was something more. The heir. The man everyone called for advice. The man cousins suddenly invited to dinner. The man relatives praised as if money had polished his soul overnight. His phone had not stopped ringing since the will reading. Financial advisors. Real estate agents. Old friends. New friends. People who had never cared what he thought now leaned close when he spoke. Nathan liked to pretend it embarrassed him. It did not. He enjoyed every second. On the glass table beside him were folders listing Eleanor's assets. 3 high-end properties. Investment accounts. Corporate shares. Bank deposits that made even Nathan sit back the first time he saw the numbers. He lifted a glass of bourbon and smiled. Grandma knew what she was doing, he said softly. Then his phone buzzed. A no number? Nathan almost ignored it. Then he answered. Nathan Bennett. The voice was smooth. Calm. Expensive. Yes. My name is Victor Langley. I worked with families like yours for many years. I understand you recently inherited several important assets. Nathan sat up slightly. Who gave you this number? A mutual connection. I don't mean to intrude. I only wanted to offer my congratulations. Nathan said nothing. Victor continued, warm and careful. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman. Difficult at times but remarkable. Nathan's eyes narrowed. You knew Eleanor? I knew of her, Victor said. And I know the properties she left behind. Some are very valuable. Others? He paused just long enough. Others may create complications. Nathan leaned back. You mean the farm? Yes. Whitaker Farm. Nathan glanced toward the folders on the table. That belongs to my sister. For now. The words hung there. Nathan stood and walked to the balcony railing. What is that supposed to mean? Victor's voice remained pleasant. It means abandoned rural land can become a legal and financial burden very quickly. Taxes, old claims, environmental issues, forgotten contracts. If your sister is overwhelmed, the entire estate could be affected. Nathan did not like the sound of that. My inheritance is separate. On paper, yes, Victor said. But families are never separate on paper for long. Nathan looked down at the city. His reflection stared back from the balcony glass, sharp suit, expensive watch, confident face. But behind the confidence something flickered. Doubt. Victor sensed it. There may be a way to help her, he said. And protect yourself. Nathan's voice softened. What kind of way? A private buyer. Quiet, fast. No public listing, no unnecessary questions. Nathan laughed once. Clara won't sell just because I tell her to. Then don't tell her, Victor said. Guide her, make her understand that keeping the farm is not practical. Nathan was silent. He thought of Clara standing in the hallway after the will reading, looking at him with wounded eyes. He had told himself he felt sorry for her. But the truth was uglier. Part of him had felt relieved. Relieved that he was the one everyone admired. Relieved that the family finally saw him as the obvious choice. Relieved that Clara had received something small enough to keep her beneath him. Victor spoke again. Your sister may be emotionally attached right now. That will pass. But if someone fills her head with old stories, she could make things difficult. Nathan turned slowly. Old stories. Victor gave a soft laugh. Every old property has legends. Failed plans, dead dreams. Papers that sound important until lawyers read them. Nothing worth risking your future over. Nathan's fingers tightened around the phone. How much is the buyer offering? Victor did not answer right away. That was the hook. Then he said a number. Nathan stopped breathing for a second. It was more than a ruined farm should ever be worth. Far more. Too much. What's really on that land? Nathan asked. Victor's voice changed almost imperceptibly. Not colder. Sharper. Opportunity. The next day, Nathan met him at a private restaurant downtown. Victor Langley was younger than Nathan expected, maybe in his early 50s, with silver at the temples and a smile that never reached his eyes. He wore no flashy jewelry. Nothing loud. That made him seem even richer. He spoke as if he were doing Nathan a favor. He asked about the inheritance. He praised Eleanor's intelligence. He called Clara well-meaning. That bothered Nathan less than it should have. She's sentimental, Nathan said, stirring his coffee. She thinks Grandma left that farm for some deep reason. Victor nodded sympathetically. People often confuse burden with destiny. Nathan looked up. The sentence felt like permission. Permission to dismiss Clara. Permission to step in. Permission to believe he was still the practical one. Victor slid a folder across the table. Inside was a purchase proposal. Clean. Simple. Fast. Nathan scanned it. This is only for the farm. For now. Nathan looked at him. Victor smiled. There are pieces of history buried in places like Whitaker Farm. Old rights. Old agreements. Old possibilities. Most people see ruins. A few people see what ruins can become. Nathan heard the warning beneath the charm. But greed spoke louder. So did pride. Clara had gone quiet since driving to the farm. She had not called him for help. She had not asked for advice. For the first time in years she was moving without him. And Nathan hated how that felt. Victor leaned in. Your grandmother trusted you with wealth, Nathan. That means she trusted your judgment. Nathan wanted to believe that. Needed to believe it. So he did. That evening Nathan called Clara. She answered after 4 rings. Clara, he said, his voice smooth and brotherly, I've been thinking about the farm. On the other end, Clara stood inside the old farmhouse. Eleanor's documents spread around her. Her eyes moved to the window. To the driveway where the black SUV had been. What about it, she asked. Nathan smiled into the phone. I may have found a way to help you get rid of it. Clara closed her hand around Eleanor's warning letter. And for the first time she understood. The man at the gate had not come for the farm alone. He had already gone through Nathan. Clara Bennett did not answer Nathan right away. She stood in the old farmhouse with the phone pressed to her ear, watching the last light crawl across the cracked window glass. Her brother's voice sounded gentle. Too gentle. I'm only trying to help, Nathan said. You saw the place yourself. It's falling apart. You don't need this kind of stress. Clara looked down at the papers on the table. Project Horizon. The old contracts. The warnings. Eleanor's words. Do not believe their smiles. Who told you about a buyer? Clara asked. Nathan paused. Just half a second. But Clara heard it. No one important, he said. A business contact. He knows rural development. He thinks the farm still has some value. Some value. Nathan cleared his throat. Enough that you should consider selling before debts and taxes eat you alive. Clara's eyes moved to the driveway. Empty now. But she could still see the black SUV in her mind. Still see the man standing beside it, looking at Whitaker Farm like it belonged to him already. What's his name? Clara asked. Nathan's voice tightened. Clara, don't make this difficult. There it was. Not concern. Control. She took a slow breath. What is his name? Another pause. Victor Langley. The name landed hard in the room. Clara reached for the photograph on the table. The one of Eleanor standing beside 3 men outside the farmhouse decades ago. The man circled in red. He lied. She did not know why yet, but the name Victor Langley felt like the same shadow wearing a new suit. Nathan, Clara said quietly, stay away from him. He laughed once, short and annoyed. You met him for 5 minutes. I saw him at the farm. That stopped him. He was there. Yes. Nathan's voice dropped. When? Today? He drove through the gate, looked at the house and left. Nathan said nothing. For the first time, Clara could hear uncertainty on the line. But pride rushed in to cover it. Well, maybe he wanted to inspect the property. That's normal. No, Clara said. That is not normal. Nathan exhaled sharply. You're being dramatic. You found a few old papers and now you think there's a conspiracy. Clara closed her eyes. There was the Nathan she knew. The Nathan who smiled when people praised him. The Nathan who spoke slowly when he thought she needed things explained. The Nathan who could not stand the idea that she might know something he did not. I found more than old papers, she said. Then tell me. Clara looked at Eleanor's folder. At the secrets her grandmother had protected for years. And for the first time in her life she did not feel the need to prove herself to her brother. Not over the phone. Nathan's voice hardened. Clara, that farm is part of this family's estate whether you like it or not. No, she said. It's mine. Silence. Then Nathan spoke coldly. You're making a mistake. Clara's hand tightened around the phone. Maybe, she said. But it will be my mistake. She ended the call. The farmhouse fell quiet again. But not for long. In the city, Victor Langley sat in the back corner of an upscale restaurant swirling a glass of water he had not touched. Across from him, Nathan stared at his phone, anger burning behind his eyes. She hung up on me, Nathan said. Victor did not look surprised. People become emotional when they feel powerless. Nathan leaned forward. She's not powerless. She owns the land. Victor smiled faintly. For the moment. Nathan studied him. Why do you want it so badly? Victor rested both hands on the table. A practiced gesture. Calm. Honest looking. Because land like that doesn't come around often. It sits forgotten for years, then suddenly the right buyer sees what everyone else missed. What did everyone else miss? Victor held Nathan's gaze. Water rights. Road access. Old development approvals. Mineral surveys. Historic cooperative agreements. Things buried in records most families never bother reading. Nathan's face changed. Greed and fear crossed it together. Clara is reading the records. Yes, Victor said softly. That is the problem. Outside rain began tapping against the restaurant windows. Victor leaned closer. Your sister doesn't understand what she has. Worse, she may convince herself she has a mission. People like that become impossible to negotiate with. Nathan looked away. He thought of Clara at the will reading. Quiet. Wounded. Easy to dismiss. But now she was at the farm alone, opening cabinets, reading letters, stepping into a story Nathan had never bothered to ask about. That bothered him. More than it should have. Victor slid another folder across the table. This is a preliminary claim review. Nathan opened it. His brow tightened. What is this? Old liabilities attached to the property. Environmental questions, unpaid county assessments, potential disputes with former partners. Nathan flipped through the pages. Can these hurt her? They can ruin her, Victor said. Unless she sells quickly? Nathan swallowed. And if she doesn't? Victor's smile disappeared. Then people will start asking whether Eleanor Whitaker had the legal right to leave that land to her at all. Nathan looked up fast. You said the will was clean. The will is clean, Victor said. The past is not. The words hung between them. A threat wrapped in legal language. Nathan should have stood up. Should have walked away. Should have called Clara and warned her. Instead, he stared at the number on the purchase proposal again. The money was enormous. Enough to expand his new empire. Enough to make him the undisputed center of the family. Enough to erase the small, ugly fear that Eleanor had given Clara something more meaningful than his millions. Victor saw the decision forming. Help me convince her, he said. And I'll make sure you are compensated for your trouble. Nathan's eyes lifted. There it was. The final hook. Not help Clara. Use Clara. Not protect the family. Profit from it. Back at Whitaker Farm, Clara moved through the warehouse with a flashlight in one hand and the old map in the other. Rain hammered the metal roof. The building groaned around her. She found another cabinet behind a stack of collapsed shelves. This one was newer than the rest. Its lock had been scratched as if someone had tried to force it open before. Clara tried the key ring. One key turned. Inside was a sealed envelope. On the front, Eleanor had written, "If Victor Langley appears, open this immediately." Clara's breath stopped. Thunder rolled across the fields. For a moment she could only stare at the name. Then she tore the envelope open. Inside was one page. Victor is not the buyer. He is the grandson of the man who destroyed Project Horizon. He will come with charm first, lawyers second, and fear last. He does not want the farm because it is worthless. He wants it because he knows what is still hidden here. Clara read the final line twice. Protect the northern field. That is where the truth begins. The flashlight flickered. Outside tires rolled slowly over wet gravel. Clara turned toward the broken window. Headlights cut through the rain. Not one vehicle this time. 3. And at the front gate, Victor Langley stepped out beneath a black umbrella, smiling into the storm like a man who had waited 30 years to come home. The 3 vehicles stopped in front of Whitaker Farm like a funeral procession. Rain poured over the windshield of the old warehouse. Clara Bennett stood inside, one hand gripping the flashlight, the other holding Eleanor's warning letter. Victor Langley stepped out first. Black umbrella. Dark coat. That careful smile. Behind him came 2 men in suits, each carrying leather folders. Not workers. Not buyers. Lawyers. Clara's stomach tightened. So this was how it began. Charm first. Lawyers second. Fear last. Victor looked toward the farmhouse, then toward the warehouse. Even through the rain, Clara could feel him searching for her. A few seconds later, her phone rang. Nathan. She stared at the name on the screen. Then answered. Clara, Nathan said quickly. Don't panic. She almost laughed. Outside, Victor's lawyers opened their folders under the shelter of the porch. Why are there 3 cars at my farm, Nathan? He exhaled. They're just there to talk. In the middle of a storm. This has gotten complicated. No, Clara said. You made it complicated. There was silence on the line. Then Nathan's voice changed. Lower. Colder. Victor's attorneys found issues with the property transfer. Clara stepped back from the window. What issues? They believe Grandma may not have had full authority to leave the farm only to you. Clara closed her eyes. There it was. The first blade. Eleanor owned this land. Maybe, Nathan said. But there were old agreements attached to it. Development partnerships. Unresolved claims. If those documents are valid, your ownership can be challenged. Clara looked down at the folder in her arms. Project Horizon. The old contracts. The betrayal. They're trying to scare me. They're trying to protect the estate, Nathan snapped. The estate, Clara's voice rose for the first time. Or your money. Nathan did not answer fast enough. That was the answer. A knock came from the warehouse door. 3 slow knocks. Victor's voice followed. Mrs. Bennett, we should talk before this becomes unpleasant. Clara ended the call. For a moment the only sound was rain pounding the metal roof. Then she opened the warehouse door. Victor stood beneath the umbrella, dry, composed, almost polite. His lawyers stood behind him with blank faces. Clara, he said gently, as if they were old friends. I'm sorry it had to happen this way. It didn't have to happen at all. His smile stayed in place. I made a generous offer. More generous than the property deserves. No, Clara said. More generous than you wanted me to question. One of the lawyers stepped forward. Mrs. Bennett, we are prepared to file an injunction preventing any sale, alteration, excavation, or transfer of materials connected to this property until ownership matters are reviewed. Clara held his stare. You came here to tell me I can't touch my own land. Victor tilted his head. We came here to prevent mistakes. Lightning flashed behind him. For one sharp second his smile vanished. Clara saw what Eleanor had seen. Not a businessman. A man waiting to take back something his family had failed to steal decades ago. Victor took one step closer. You have no idea what you're standing in the middle of. Clara lifted Eleanor's letter. I know exactly what I'm standing in. Victor's eyes flicked to the paper. That tiny movement told Clara everything. He was afraid of what she had found. The lawyer opened his folder and pulled out a document. This is formal notice of pending legal action. You are advised to vacate the premises until the court determines whether your claim is uncontested. Clara did not take the paper. You can mail it. The lawyer's mouth tightened. Victor sighed softly. Clara, pride is expensive. Your brother understands that. He is being practical. My brother is being used. Victor's expression hardened just enough to make the air feel colder. Nathan understands opportunity. No, Clara said. Nathan understands being praised. You figured that out fast. For the first time, Victor did not smile. Rain ran off the edge of his umbrella in steady streams. You are outmatched, he said. You're one woman in a collapsing farm holding papers you barely understand. Clara stepped forward until they were only a few feet apart. I may not understand everything yet, she said. But I understand this. If the farm was worthless, you wouldn't be standing in the rain with 2 lawyers. The words landed hard. One lawyer looked away. Victor's jaw tightened. In the city, Nathan stood beside his penthouse window, phone still in his hand. He had heard Clara's final words before the call ended. They stayed with him. Or your money. He looked at the purchase proposal on the table. Then at the family group chat lighting up with messages. Nathan, is Clara really fighting the will? Is the farm tied to lawsuits? Should we be worried? The story was spreading already. Victor had made sure of it. By morning, the inheritance would no longer be a private wound. It would be a family war. Back at the farm, Victor turned to leave. This is only the beginning, he said. Clara watched him walk toward the SUV. I know, she said. He stopped. She raised the folder against her chest. But Eleanor left me more than land. Victor looked back. The rain blurred his face but not his anger. Clara's voice cut through the storm. She left me proof. For the first time, Victor Langley looked afraid. Only for a second. But Clara saw it. And that second was enough. As the 3 vehicles rolled away from Whitaker Farm, Clara stood alone in the rain, soaked to the skin, holding the documents that had started the war. Her family thought she was breaking. Victor thought she would fold. Nathan thought money still made him the powerful one. But Clara Bennett had finally understood the real battle. This was not about selling a ruined farm. This was about who had the right to bury the truth. And she was done letting other people decide what Eleanor's legacy was worth. Clara Bennett spent the rest of the night at the farmhouse table. The storm had passed, but water still dripped from the porch roof in slow, steady beats. Drip, 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 like a clock counting down. The papers Eleanor Whitaker left behind covered every inch of the table. Old contracts, letters, maps, photographs, legal notices. Clara had read them until the words blurred, but one thing was now painfully clear. Victor Langley was not just interested in Whitaker Farm. His family had been circling it for decades. And Eleanor had known. Clara opened the envelope marked, "Protect the Northern Field Again." Inside was a small hand-drawn map different from the others. It showed the far edge of the property past the dead orchard and beyond an old service road. Eleanor had drawn a circle around a narrow stone building Clara had not noticed before. Beside it, she had written, "Archive Room. Not listed in county records." Clara looked toward the window. The sky was still dark. But waiting until morning suddenly felt dangerous. She grabbed her flashlight, put Eleanor's letters into a canvas bag and stepped outside. The wet grass soaked her shoes within seconds. The air smelled like rain, mud and old wood. Every sound felt too loud, the crunch of gravel under her feet, the creak of branches, her own breathing. The northern field was farther than it looked on the map. Clara passed the first barn. Then the warehouse. Then the collapsed fence where cattle must have once stood. At the edge of the orchard she stopped. The trees were twisted and bare, their branches reaching into the gray darkness like hands. Beyond them, almost hidden by brush, stood the stone building. Small, windowless, easy to miss. The door was made of thick wood with a rusted metal latch. Clara tried the first key. Nothing. The second. Nothing. The third key slid in halfway, then stuck. "Come on," she whispered. She pushed harder. The lock turned. The door opened with a deep groan. A smell of dry paper and cold stone rushed out. Clara stepped inside and raised the flashlight. Shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Boxes. Ledgers. Photographs. Blueprint tubes. File cabinets. Not forgotten. Protected. Her hand rose to her mouth. Oh, Grandma. This was not a storage room. It was Eleanor's hidden memory of everything. Clara moved to the nearest cabinet. A label on the drawer read, "Langley Development, Salgado Partners, Private Correspondence." Her heart began to pound. She opened it. Inside were letters between Victor's grandfather Charles Langley and a group of investors. Clara read the first page, then the next, then another. The truth came together like a match catching fire. Charles Langley had never wanted to support Project Horizon. He wanted to control it. He and his partners planned to pressure Eleanor into signing over the land after the project became valuable. They wanted the road rights, the water rights, the warehouse permits, and the community contracts. Not to help the county. To turn it all into private development. Clara found a memo dated 32 years earlier. If Mrs. Whitaker refuses, isolate her financially. Remove institutional support. Encourage legal delays until she cannot continue. Clara's knees weakened. They had planned the collapse. Every lawsuit. Every missing contract. Every bank withdrawal. Every delay. It had not been bad luck. It had been sabotage. Then she found the photograph. Eleanor stood at a community event smiling beside Charles Langley and two other men. On the back, Eleanor had written, "They shook my hand in public and buried me in private." Clara's eyes burned. She kept searching. A second drawer held recordings, old cassette tapes, each labeled by date. Beside them was a small tape player wrapped in cloth. Clara pressed play. Static filled the room. Then, Eleanor's voice came through. "You offered me partnership. You meant ownership." A man answered. "Mrs. Whitaker, you are emotional. Be reasonable." Clara froze. The man's voice was smooth. Cold. "Charles Langley." Eleanor spoke again, clear and firm. "This farm was promised to the people here. I will not sign it away." Charles laughed softly. "Then we will make sure no one believes in your project when we are done." Clara stopped the tape. The room felt airless. This was the evidence. Not rumors. Not old stories. Proof. She pulled every file connected to the Langley name. There were bank letters showing sudden reversals. County complaints filed by shell companies. Internal notes, naming investors who pretended to support Eleanor while secretly working against her. And then at the bottom of the final drawer, Clara found a sealed folder. On the front, Eleanor had written, "For the day they come back." Inside was a complete timeline of Project Horizon's destruction. Names, dates, payments, legal filings, copies of letters. And one final note. "Clara, they will call this history. Do not let them. History is what people remember. Evidence is what makes the guilty answer." Clara held the note to her chest. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was clear. For the first time, she was not just defending the farm. She was defending Eleanor. She was defending every farmer who had signed those agreements. Every worker who had lost a job. Every family that had been promised a future and then watched it vanish without knowing why. By sunrise, Clara returned to the farmhouse carrying 3 boxes of evidence. Her clothes were damp. Her hair was loose. Mud clung to her shoes. But her eyes had changed. When her phone rang, she did not flinch. Nathan again. She answered. Clara, he said, tense. Victor says this can still be settled quietly. Clara looked at the boxes on the table. No, she said. Nathan sighed. Please don't make this worse. She opened the folder and stared at Charles Langley's signature. It already was worse, Clara said. We just didn't know who made it that way. What are you talking about? Clara's voice was steady. I found the archive. Silence. Then Nathan whispered, what archive? The one Grandma hid from men like Victor. Outside morning light spread over Whitaker Farm. The barns still leaned. The fields were still overgrown. The farmhouse was still cracked and tired. But the truth had survived. And now Clara had it in her hands. Nathan Bennett arrived at Whitaker Farm just after noon. He did not come in a polished mood this time. No perfect smile. No smooth advice. No voice pretending to be kind. His black sedan rolled through the gate slowly, tires crunching over gravel still damp from the storm. When he stepped out, Clara saw it immediately from the porch. Something had changed. His shoulders were lower. His face looked tired. For the first time since the will reading, Nathan did not look like the man who had won. He looked like a man who had finally understood the price of winning. Clara stood at the top of the porch steps, arms folded, Eleanor's archive boxes stacked behind her inside the house. Nathan looked at the farmhouse. Then the barns. Then the fields. He swallowed. I didn't know, he said. Clara did not move. You didn't ask. The words hit him harder than anger would have. He looked down at his shoes. They were expensive city shoes already stained with mud. I thought. He stopped and shook his head. I thought Grandma left you a problem. Clara's eyes stayed on him. And you thought that made sense. Nathan looked up. There it was. The truth between them. Not Victor. Not lawyers. Not the will. Something older. Nathan had believed deep inside that Clara receiving less was natural. That he was meant for the fortune. That she was meant for the burden. He stepped closer, but Clara raised one hand. Don't come up here with another offer. I didn't. Don't ask me to settle quietly. I won't. Don't tell me Victor is trying to help. Nathan's jaw tightened. At that name, shame crossed his face. I know he isn't. Clara studied him. For a long moment only the wind moved between them. Then Nathan reached into his coat and pulled out a folder. Clara stiffened. Nathan noticed. It's not from Victor, he said quickly. It's from me. He placed the folder on the porch step and backed away. Clara looked at it but did not pick it up. What is it? Emails. Texts. The purchase proposal. Notes from our meetings. Everything Victor sent me. Clara's expression changed slightly. Nathan's voice broke at the edges. He told me you were emotional. He told me Grandma had made a mistake. He told me I could protect the estate. He gave a bitter laugh. Protect the estate. That's what he called it. Clara said nothing. Nathan looked toward the northern field. I wanted to believe him because it made me feel important. The honesty surprised them both. He kept going, before pride could stop him. All my life I thought Grandma saw me as the capable one. The strong one, the one who could handle money, lawyers, business. Then she left you this place and I told myself it was because it wasn't worth anything. His eyes shone now, but he fought it. Because if it was worth something, if it mattered, then maybe she trusted you with the thing she loved most. Clara's face softened, but only a little. Nathan looked back at her. And I couldn't stand that. The words hung in the air. Raw. Ugly. Real. Clara slowly walked down one step. You let Victor use that. I know. You helped him pressure me. I know. You made me feel small in front of everyone. Nathan's mouth trembled. I know. For the first time, Nathan did not defend himself. He did not explain. He did not hide behind business talk. He just stood there in the mud, stripped of all the confidence that had made him look powerful and empty at the same time. Clara picked up the folder. Inside were printed messages. Victor's instructions. His offers. His warnings. His careful language. His plan to push Clara toward fear, then force her toward sale. One message made Clara stop. If she resists Nathan, remind her she cannot afford a legal fight. People like your sister usually fold once they feel alone. Clara's fingers tightened around the page. Nathan saw her reaction. I'm sorry, he whispered. Clara looked at him. Sorry doesn't fix this. I know. Sorry doesn't bring back what Grandma lost. I know. Sorry doesn't rebuild Project Horizon. Nathan lifted his eyes. Then let me help rebuild it. Clara almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because only days earlier Nathan had wanted the farm gone. Now he stood there asking to save it. You think I should trust you? No, Nathan said. Not yet. That answer stopped her. He stepped back again, giving her space. I'll give my statement to your lawyer, I'll testify if I have to. I'll admit Victor approached me. I'll admit I helped him. I'll admit I was wrong. The wind moved across the porch. Somewhere in the distance an old sheet of metal tapped softly against a barn roof. Nathan looked around the farm again. I don't know how to fix what I became, he said. But I know I don't want to keep becoming it. Clara's eyes filled though her voice stayed steady. Grandma left you money, Nathan. She didn't leave you permission to lose yourself. He looked down. That sentence broke something in him. His shoulders shook once. Then again. He turned away, covering his face with one hand. For years Nathan had performed success so well that even he believed it. But now standing in front of the broken farm he had mocked, he finally saw the truth. His inheritance had made him rich. But it had also exposed him. Clara let the silence sit. Then she walked down the porch steps and stood beside him. Not touching him. Not forgiving him completely. Just standing close enough that he knew the door was not forever closed. Inside the farmhouse Eleanor's archive waited. Outside the fields waited. And between them stood a brother and sister who had almost been divided by greed, pride, and a dead woman's unfinished dream. Nathan wiped his eyes and looked at Clara. What do we do now? Clara looked toward the northern field, the place where the truth had survived. We fight him, she said. Nathan nodded. Then Clara added, and after that we finish what Grandma started. Nathan looked at the ruined barns, the overgrown roads, the silent warehouses. For the first time he did not see a burden. He saw the shape of a promise. And beside him Clara Bennett stood taller than he had ever seen her. Months later, Whitaker Farm no longer looked like a place people whispered about. It looked alive. The broken front gate had been repaired, but Clara Bennett insisted on keeping the old farm sign. The faded letters still showed through the fresh paint, a reminder that some things do not need to be replaced to be restored. The barns were no longer empty. One had become a training center where young people learned farming, bookkeeping, equipment repair, and small business skills. Another held shelves of produce from local growers who had once been told they were too small to survive. Every morning, trucks rolled in before sunrise. Men and women unloaded crates of tomatoes, corn, apples, and fresh bread. Retired workers came back to teach. Families came to buy food at fair prices. Kids ran across the grass where weeds had once swallowed the road. Project Horizon had returned. Not as a dream on old paper. As real jobs. Real meals. Real second chances. Clara stood near the warehouse doors, watching it all with quiet tears in her eyes. Nathan walked up beside her, carrying a clipboard instead of a bourbon glass, his sleeves rolled up, mud on his shoes. You know, he said softly, Grandma would be bossing everyone around right now. Clara smiled. She still is. Across the field, a new sign had been raised. Project Horizon, founded by Eleanor Whitaker, restored by the people she never stopped believing in. Nathan looked at it for a long time. She left me money, he said. But she left you the future. Clara shook her head. No, she said. She left us a chance to become worthy of both. For a moment neither of them spoke. The wind moved through the fields. The old farmhouse stood behind them, repaired but still carrying its scars. And for the first time in years, those scars did not look like damage. They looked like proof. Proof that greed can bury a dream. But it cannot kill it when one person is brave enough to dig it back up. Sometimes the greatest inheritance is not money, property, or anything the world can easily count. Sometimes it is trust. A responsibility. A burden that looks worthless until you have the courage to look closer. Clara was mocked because people only saw what was broken. Nathan was praised because people only saw what was shiny. But in the end, the broken farm carried the real treasure because it held purpose, truth, and a future for others. So before you judge what someone has received, ask yourself this. Is it really small? Or do you simply not understand its value yet? And before you envy someone else's fortune, remember this. Money can reveal character. But responsibility can transform it. What would you have done if you were Clara? Would you have sold the farm, or would you have stayed and fought for the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments. And subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that remind us what courage, family, and legacy truly mean.